Hi, my name is Jan Olivier and I am the Learning Manager at the Chartered Institute. My team and I are responsible for supporting students studying towards the CIA and the QIL designations. Today we'll be looking mainly at the CIA, what the syllabus looks like, the core areas within the syllabus, areas that you should be familiar with, before moving on to see what support we have put in place for you. And along the way, we'll also be looking at different tips and techniques that you can apply to make your studies more enjoyable and more successful. If you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the Q&A box on the right of your screen. And then at the end of the workshop, we will revisit those to see if we have covered all the questions. The qualification itself consists of 3 parts, which can be taken in any sequence. Examinable online in one of over 100 centres within the UK and Ireland. And to support your progress, we've put together a very comprehensive self-study program. But the key thing of the CIA is that it sets you apart from your peers. Peers that may not hold the CIA qualification and therefore do not hold the skills necessary to be a professional internal auditor. Your first step would have been to register with the Chartered Institute as a student member and to register on the CIA qualification. That process would have prompted you to access Global's CCMS system and to upload the necessary information there. Thirdly, you would have received your books as well as access to the CIA Learning Center. If you have omitted any of these steps, please get in touch with us as soon as possible and we will assist you. IA Global uses a system called scaled scoring. This means that your score, the final score for the exam, will be between 250 and 750. So in theory, even if you get all the questions wrong, you will still get 250 out of 750 marks. The passing score is 600, which works out to be approximately 80%. Once you've downloaded the syllabus, you will see that it provides for proficiency level knowledge as well as awareness level. And it is very important that you understand the difference and the requirements of these two. Awareness level is a lower level. And this asks you to just have a grasp of the terminology or fundamentals of a concept. Proficiency level asks you to be able to not just understand, but to have a thorough understanding of the concept, and what's more, to be able to apply that concept into a certain scenario. It is very important that you understand these differences. Remember that you will be assessed against the IIA Global syllabus and not against the materials. It is therefore very important that you go to the IIA Global website and you download a copy of the syllabus. And as you prepare for your exam, you also reflect on the syllabus itself, the areas that are highlighted in the syllabus, and pay particular attention to the verbs that are used within the syllabus and that you can do that. As I mentioned earlier, you can do the 3 parts in any sequence. My recommendation would be to look at the areas within which you feel most comfortable. If you have been in internal audit for a while, you'll probably feel more at home within part 2 because these are things that you would have experience with. If you are new to the field of internal audit, you might be more comfortable starting with part 1. Each part of the syllabus deals with a specific area within internal audit. Part 1 looks at the theory. So this is the part of the syllabus that deals mostly with the IPPF and the international standards. We'll talk a bit about that later. The second part deals with the practice. How do you get an audit done? What do you have to do? And this is usually also the module that practicing internal auditors find the easiest. The third part deals with those areas that internal auditors should have knowledge of, but doesn't necessarily fall within internal audit. These would include things like IT, or maybe even areas such as the organizational structure. So let's kick off with part one. This part is also referred to as internal audit basics. And by basics, we mean the foundation. The entire syllabus is supported by the International Professional Practices Framework, or most commonly referred to as the IPPF. As a member of the Institute, you will have access to the resources section on our website. If you go to resources and you go to guidance, there is very comprehensive support around the IPPF. Lots of explanatory work, briefings, explanations, and so forth. It is vital that you be very, very familiar with the IPPF. It looks at mandatory guidance. It also looks at the tools and techniques for audit engagements. For the Part 1 exam, you will have 2.5 hours in which you have to answer 125 multiple choice questions. If my math skills doesn't let me down, it means that you have about 1.2 minutes to answer a question. Now, this might sound like a lot, but believe me, you will have to work at a considerable pace to get through the exam. So looking at the Part 1 syllabus, I would prioritize mandatory guidance. If you look at the percentage, you will see that it counts the most out of the 3 sections. It's also on the proficiency level. Secondly, I would deal with the conducting internal audit engagements. And then finally, I would look at internal controls and risk. Again, this is my assessment and how I would have done it. It is not prescriptive at all. Moving on to Part 2, this part of the syllabus deals with the actual internal audit. So the main areas here are: how do you manage an internal audit function? How do you manage your engagements? So we are looking here at things like the strategic role of internal audit and internal audit in terms of operational processes. How do you plan? How do you put together your plan for internal audit? How do you plan your engagements? How do you supervise your engagements? How do you communicate the results of those engagements to an internal audit committee or so forth? We also then naturally deal quite a bit with fraud and risk, what the risks are that you're going and how you will be identifying them. How do you look at frauds, investigation of fraud, and so forth. So very, very much a practical module. And it is for this reason that we found that people already in the profession working internal auditors, this is the module that they find the easiest. And then the pass rate for this is also significantly higher than for the others. So in terms of what you can expect in the exam, 100 questions, 2 hours. Now, the entire module, all the sections on the syllabus for Part 2 are proficiency, the level questions. So these are the higher level questions. These are the questions that ask you to interpret and to apply the knowledge. I would look at the first 2 areas, how to manage an internal audit function and how to manage individual engagements more. These will count about roughly the same, and then maybe pick up the slack a little at the end with fraud, risk and control. But this is a paper that is pretty well spread out. There's no real area within the syllabus that you can skimp on. So my suggestion is look at everything. This brings us to the third and final part. You will remember earlier I mentioned that part 3 deals with those areas of an organization that internal auditors need to be aware of, but are not necessarily internal audit. Now, looking at these in detail, these include things like governance and ethics, risk management, organizational structure, communication. So looking at the syllabus in a little bit more detail, 100 questions, 2 hours. First thing you would have noticed is that the syllabus for part 3 is enormous, and that is going to be your biggest challenge. It's a lot of information that you need to process. Also, it's a lot of information to cover in 100 questions, which means that there are going to be parts of the content that will probably not be examined. So that makes it very, very, very hard to spot. So my idea is don't. Work through everything and make sure you have a good knowledge of what the content is about. If you look at the slide, you will see that there are 2 areas that stand out. One is governance and business ethics, and secondly are risk management. Those 2 are the proficiency areas. And as I said before, these are the areas that will give you the majority of marks. Looking at the remainder of the areas, IT stands out as counting quite a lot, as well as organizational structure. Look at the percentages allocated to each area in the syllabus and use that as some guidance on how many questions you're going to get regarding a certain area. Don't spot, but use that to evaluate and maybe rate in terms of priority. Considering that your final mark will be out of 750, you can now start to understand the importance of the proficiency level and the awareness level. Questions on the proficiency level are going to count significantly more within the exam than questions on the awareness level. So go back to the syllabus, look at which areas are proficiency, and look at which areas are awareness. Also look at the percentages allocated to different areas within the syllabus, because that is also going to be very handy for you to focus on certain areas. My suggestion would be, as a priority, look at the proficiency areas, then look at the awareness areas. And when grading these by importance, look at the percentages and look at the areas that count the most marks, and then work down from there. One of the key tools you will have at your disposal is the CIA Student Hub. The CIA Student Hub is accessible via our website. You need to log in, use your member details, go to Students and access the Study Center here. That will bring you to the Hub. Have a look at the Hub. We try to build in a lot of support that students were not getting on the CIA learning system. The CIA learning system is very good. It gives you a lot of support, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. But this will also give you an additional question bank. It will give you the opportunity to engage and to interact with other students. So please have a look at the Hub, find out where it is, and make sure you access it often. Undoubtedly, the CIA learning system will be your lifeline. This is where you're going to be spending most of your time. And by the CIA Learning System, I also mean the books that you will have at your disposal. There are some incredibly handy functionality that you could use. Have a look at the study plan functionality, because it's very useful to see how much time you can spend on certain areas. Also have a look at the quizzes. There are so many quizzes, and these are very, very, very handy. Have a look at the downloadable formats of the books. These will also help you a lot. You will also find on this learning system that you can print out practice cards. for definitions and terms. Have a look at those. It's very, very, very handy. You need to consider that this is a self-study course, and you need to decide at which pace you are going to learn. Approach this as a project. Decide when you're going to start, how many hours you are going to allocate to during each week. Work out how long it's going to take you to get through the content. Plan which revision workshop you're going to attend. Think about when you want to sit the exam. Map this all out and keep to it. Because there's always going to be a temptation that you can change an exam, move it by a week, move it by another 2 weeks. Don't do that. Don't be fooled. Stick to your plan. Keep a plan and stick to your plan. Study the materials, all of it. For example, before you come to the revision workshops, you have to have studied the content in quite a bit of detail. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit of detail. Look at the application of concepts and practice for the exam. Use your quizzes and practice for the exam. Around that, there's also some quizzes available on the IIA Global website. If you go to the certification section, have a look there. There are some more quizzes there as well. So how do you plan for your studies? First things first, look at the plan. Go onto the CIA learning system. There is a plan there that you can follow. Have a look at it. Look at the different areas. How long it's going to take you to cover each area. Do the pre-test so that you know your level of understanding before you start working, and measure that with the outcome at the end so that you have a basis of comparing your knowledge. Use the Smart Study tool. Try to arrange your own study groups. Go onto the hub and find students in your area, maybe, on the discussion forums, and then you can use functionality like Skype to set up groups where you can chat with one another, you can talk to you about the concepts, you can work out questions and discuss possible answers and why one person thinks this is an answer and so forth. It works very, very well. Try to use that as well. Revision workshops, although not compulsory, are very, very, very handy. They are designed to help you prepare for the exam. They will look at the difficult concepts, the more tricky concepts that you encounter in the materials and the application thereof. So don't expect 2 days of lecture, because that certainly isn't what's going to be. It's an interactive session, lots of group work where you have to provide a lot of input. We've also found that 66% of students who attended workshops passed the exam. That's a very, very high percentage. So if you can attend them, they are all done by professional internal auditors. They're all done by people who hold not only the CIA qualification, but the chartered qualification. We offer these in London and Manchester. Please have a look at our website, and if you can, attend one of these workshops. You will definitely benefit. Students often ask us how long do they have to spend studying for the different parts. And this is very difficult to answer because people will have different backgrounds, different levels of experience, qualifications, and so forth. But if forced to answer, I will answer this, that a student with a degree in a related discipline, accountancy or a business degree, and with 2 years experience within internal audit, would spend between 60 and 80 hours on each of part 1 and part 2, and then another 140 to 160 hours on part 3. That means that we would expect you to study between 260 and 320 hours for the qualification in general. Now this includes everything. It includes your reading, your preparation, your revision, as well as the exam itself. But to give you just an idea, this is how long it should take you to finish this qualification. At this point, I do want to talk to you quickly about quizzes. Now, quizzes are very, very important, and they are very, very useful when you're preparing for an exam. But you need to be careful of how you use them. Remember that you only have a definite number of quizzes available to you. And if you're going to start using it over and over and over and over, you're going to start remembering the answer and not necessarily the reason why it is an answer. And we've seen this many, many times where students have worked through the quizzes so many times that they get 100% every time they do a quiz, but then when they walk into the exam, they fail. So please be careful. Do not over-rely on the quizzes. They're very handy, but use them sparingly and make sure you use them only when you really need to.